This is Dr. Don Eddy with Terrible Schools. There are many reasons that the quality of schools is just terrible. Some would say that the lack of school safety in a daily educational environment contributes to the decline in learning. When I mention school safety, I'm not talking about the type of school safety that is media-driven. The type of school safety I'm describing is where students who wish to learn are held hostage by a fraction of a percent of students who rain havoc on the rest of the educational environment. These same students are free to commit crimes in school because consequences for these students can be perceived as racist or sexist. These policies protect savage bullies instead of the kids who attend school to learn. There are 3 reasons that your child sent to school with manners and a desire to learn is able to be bullied on a constant basis, and the schools are powerless to prevent it. Zero tolerance policies, compulsory attendance, and special education policies are directly responsible. According to this website, you can find an article. They state, zero tolerance policies developed in the 1990s in response to school shootings and general fears about crime. In 1994, the federal government passed the Gun-Free Schools Act, which requires schools to expel any student who brings a gun to campus. Around the same time, the broken windows theory of law enforcement became popular. The idea was that cracking down on minor violations prevented serious crimes. Under similar thinking, schools started enacting disciplinary policies that went further than the federal law. The rules varied from school to school, but they commonly required suspending or expelling students for a wide range of conduct. You are free to look at this list on your own, but for the sake of brevity, I'm only going to choose one of these because it is the most relevant to this specific topic. And that would be fighting, including minor scuffles. In a free society, an aggressor could be dealt with appropriately to protect themselves from physical harm. It seems that schools are not free societies. Because of zero tolerance policies, your baby girl, instilled with traditional values and a hope for a bright future, is discouraged from exhibiting a natural response to protect herself out of consequences that
some consider to be unnatural.
I'm not getting suspended about you. I am not getting suspended about you. I am not getting suspended about you.
Zero tolerance policies lack common sense if children are afraid to naturally defend themselves. Some seem to forget that humans are animals by nature. In nature, animals are prone to defend themselves out of self-preservation. A majority of people would probably agree that standing up to bullies, even physically if necessary, is the most important step in stopping bullies. Because of zero tolerance policies, this option is simply not available in the minds of many students, administrators, and parents. Compulsory attendance makes it possible for all bullies to stay in constant contact with their victims. Regardless of a student's special education designation, rarely are students expelled or transferred for bullying others. Instead, they usually take a short vacation at home, then return to the same environment with the victims who were previously terrorized. Education is not mentioned in the Constitution, so states take the responsibility of mandating attendance policies. Compulsory attendance has been required by states for a little over 100 years. Financially, schools and districts benefit with higher attendance rates since in many cases budgets are designed based on average daily attendance. Since there is a financial incentive to keep all students in school, even bullies have a place in the large scheme of things. If that bully happens to qualify for special education services under an individual education plan or IEP or a 504 plan, it could potentially mean more funding and more jobs. I would hate to imagine the pain of a parent who has to endure some of the non-fatal tragedies that occur daily in schools across the U.S. Picture seeing your severely beaten child who is put in that condition by juvenile monsters who prey upon the weak. Schools seem to favor bullies so much that parents can't be made aware of severely violent children or even active sexual predators amongst the student population.
This mother was also at the meeting to ask the board why her daughter, who also attends Cape Coral High School, was punished after a male student assaulted her.
She has to go back to a school where the same boy who violated her put his hands on her because he wasn't taught not to put his hands on people's children is at that school.
She told me school administrators didn't notify her after the incident, and now her daughter feels uncomfortable going to school.
If you don't believe me, simply call your child's school and ask how many students in your child's class or school have been arrested or charged as juvenile sexual predators. Special education, like many government programs, was well intended initially. It was designed to prevent the exclusion of students from mainstream education only because they were different. The intent bears a stark contrast to reality. If a student hurts another and it is determined that the aggressor did so due to a disability, things will just go back to normal. Some of these unscrupulous ruffians have the gall to attack staff. There isn't one teacher preparation program in America that offers self-defense as a prerequisite. The expectation is for the adult to take any beating administered to them by a kid simply because that kid is special. The expectation is for the adult to accept that child back into the educational environment with loving and welcoming arms. It would seem curious that most parents wouldn't allow their child to physically attack them, but society expects teachers to allow someone else's child to physically attack them. I don't believe most people realize that if a student is diagnosed with a special education disability such as EBD, which basically means that being bad is a disability, they can generally only be removed for 10 total days in a school year. Some places have an in-school suspension program to send kids who are disruptive in the classroom. In some of these places, the time special education students spend in the in-school suspension program counts as time toward their total suspension days. In effect, after special education students have exhausted their 10 suspension days in a year, it almost takes an act of Congress to remove that kid who violently misbehaves from the environment. As long as we have zero tolerance policies, compulsory attendance, and special education policies, good children will continue to be traumatized, and some will even attempt or commit suicide to escape the clutches of these violent monsters allowed to terrorize the population. Again, this is Dr. Don Eddy with Terrible Schools, and I'll leave you with this. Why is one child's right to an education more important than another child's right to safety?